In ancient Egypt, the pharaoh married his own sister. It was a sacred duty, while the rest of the world did not accept such a union. Scientists only found the answer to why blood relation is so dangerous more than 2,000 years later. When you hear who found it, you'll be surprised. At the end, I'll tell you about a dynasty that knew all the risks better than anyone in the world, and deliberately took them again and again. From Africa to America, a bond between parent and child, between brother and sister, was almost everywhere taboo, and no one knew why. Nobody knew anything about genes or mutations yet. The Finnish sociologist Edward Westermark proposed an explanation at the end of the 19th century. People raised together from early childhood feel a natural sexual aversion to one another, not because of religion or upbringing, but something more ancient, wired into the psyche itself. But with cousins, an uncle, and a niece, things got confusing. A norm in some cultures, unthinkable in others. In 506, a Catholic council convened in southern France and banned marriages closer than third cousins. By the early 9th century, the ban had grown to the 7th degree of kinship. Relatives so distant an ordinary person might not even know they existed. Why exactly then is something historians still debate. One theory points to plague epidemics, in which church thinkers saw something unclean. This ban had an unexpected side effect, studied by the authors of a paper in the journal Science. Clans held together through cousin marriages. That's how land and power stayed within one family. When the church banned this, people had to look for husbands and wives outside their own clan, relocating, dealing with strangers, building a life among people they didn't know. This is how a different mindset forms: more trust toward strangers, less blind obedience to one's own group, a person seeing themselves as separate from the clan. That's exactly what we call Western individualism. And researchers showed that the regions of Europe where the church banned kin marriage the longest are precisely the ones that differ from the rest of the world in this way today. The person who explained this scientifically was Charles Darwin. He crossbred plants with themselves, generation after generation, and the offspring consistently grew weaker, fewer seeds, lower survival rates. But the most striking part of this story isn't the plants. Darwin was married to his own cousin, Emma Wedgwood. They had 10 children. 3 died before the age of 10, and 3 more of the surviving children never had children of their own. In his letters, Darwin worried that his children were not very healthy, but he couldn't divorce the wife he loved. Almost a century and a half later, geneticists tested his fears directly. A team led by Tim Barra of Ohio State University reconstructed the Darwin and Wedgwood family tree and calculated the inbreeding coefficient, the probability that a child inherited the same copy of a gene from both parents. The result confirmed what Darwin had feared his whole life. His own family turned out to be living proof of his own theory. Every person has 2 sets of genes, one from the mother, one from the father. Many genes exist in broken versions, but they cause no harm if there's a healthy copy from the other parent. The trouble starts when both parents happen to carry the same broken version of a gene. Then, the child can end up with 2 broken copies at once, and a disease that had been silently lurking in the family for generations suddenly shows up in full force. For 2 unrelated people, the chance of carrying the same rare mutation is tiny. They come from different family lines. For relatives who inherited DNA from the same ancestors, that chance is far higher. The closer the relation, the higher the odds of a match. So why does nature even work this way? Breeding with an unrelated partner creates genetic diversity, and that diversity protects a species if a new disease appears or the climate shifts. Breeding within the family breaks that insurance. The gene pool narrows, and the bet gets riskier with every generation. Now imagine a dynasty that kept making that bet again and again for 2 centuries straight. This is the Habsburgs, one of the most powerful dynasties in Europe. By the early 16th century, they ruled Austria, Spain, the Netherlands, and territories in the New World. They gained power not through war, but through marriage. Let others wage war. You, happy Austria, marry. Through advantageous marriages, a modest Swiss county turned into the rulers of half a continent. But the more land gathered in one set of hands, the more terrifying it became to lose it. Marry off a daughter to a foreign king, and the territory is gone for good. So the Spanish branch of the Habsburgs started keeping marriage within their own bloodline. Outside, blood stopped entering the family. The loop tightened with every generation. Philip I married a 3rd cousin. His son, Charles I, married a 1st cousin. Philip II took his own niece as a wife, and his grandson from that marriage, Philip IV, did the same with his niece, Mariana of Austria. Of the 11 marriages contracted by the Spanish Habsburgs over 200 years, 9 were between relatives. Their son, Charles II, was born with such a concentration of related blood that his paternal grandmother was also his aunt. Geneticists from the University of Santiago de Compostela traced his family tree across 16 generations and calculated his inbreeding coefficient. The number was 0.254, practically the same level as a child born to a brother and sister. The result was visible without any genetics at all, just by looking at his face. The famous Habsburg jaw in Charles was so pronounced that his teeth didn't even meet. He couldn't chew properly, didn't speak until he was nearly 4, and didn't walk until he was 8. Charles married twice. No children were born. When he died at 38, the Spanish line of the Habsburgs ended with him. And Europe plunged into the War of the Spanish Succession, which drew in half the continent. The Habsburgs built an empire through marriage, and marriage buried it. If you found it interesting how human intuition guessed, thousands of years ago, what science would only prove with Darwin, like and subscribe. There are more stories ahead about how the things we take for granted today came to be.